Hi, everybody. Welcome to the term of the week at the Behavioral Web.
My name is Mike Marroquin.
I'm Lilian Rocha.
We are both BCBAs that work in very different fields, and the motivation or inspiration for this term of the week lesson is to really help BCBAs or BCBAs that are working, people that are working on becoming BCBAs.
As he calls pre-CBAs.
That's right. Learn the terminology and learn the sort of intricacies of the terminology that they need to be able to do well in their exam and do well in their courses. So this will not be the end all be all and the final definition of anything, but it'll be one definition, our definition of each of the terms that we find useful or that you request, and we'll discuss them each week and see what you think about it.
And it's not just about, the exam. The exam is one part of it, but in the end, we want you to be able to do better behavior analysis. And so talking about the terms helps you think and reflect about your practice.
And one reason that we came up with this is that we go to dinner, we go to events, we go to conferences, and we talk about this stuff with each other. We talk about how I'm using
out.
That's right. How I'm using a particular strategy or how you're using a particular strategy. And I always think that it would be useful for students to be part of that conversation. So this is an attempt to make that conversation available to you as it is to us. So today's term, or this week's term rather, is reinforcement. And we picked this particular picture for an interesting reason. A lot of people misunderstand the term reinforcement or might be using it incorrectly, and they think reinforcers are M&Ms. That's just Skittles. How it works. Skittles or popcorn or pretzels.
Oreos.
And those are probably reinforcers for certain people, and some of them are my reinforcers, and some of them are your reinforcers as well. But understanding what reinforcement actually is, so that you're in a position to use it effectively, is what we're really trying to get at here.
So reinforcement or reinforcer is not one particular thing. It could be anything, and one thing will vary by each person.
Mm-hmm. And the goal is to, if you could understand what someone's reinforcers are, that puts you in a better position to be able to work with and help them change their behavior. So let's start with the Cooper, Heron, and Heward definition. Here, reinforcement is a procedure. So reinforcement occurs when stimulus change immediately follows a response and increases in the future frequency of that type of behavior in similar conditions.
Now, reinforcer is a stimulus change that increases the future frequency of behavior that immediately precedes it.
And while this is the definition of reinforcement that most people have access to,
that's what you need to remember for your exam.
There's some limitations here, and one limitation is that it talks about the future frequency of behavior, but it doesn't talk about duration. It doesn't talk about magnitude. You can reinforce someone for speaking loudly. You can reinforce someone for speaking quieter. You can reinforce someone you can reinforce someone for speaking slowly or faster. There's lots of different ways that you can change behavior. You can
reinforce the behavior of interrupting. Like every time I interrupt him, he stops and lets me speak.
Yeah, and that gets annoying when you don't actually have anything to say, but that's just me. So the idea is that you don't want to constrain reinforcement to the. See, I'm not going to reinforce that behavior.
Are you sure? You're laughing.
You don't want to narrow the idea of reinforcement to just something that increases the future frequency of behavior. You can loosely describe it as reinforcement increases behavior, and just end it there.
And it could be, any dimension of behavior. It could be intertrial time. It could be many things.
So what we have to say, we're going to talk about lots of different issues in terms of reinforcement and see what you think. When we talk about reinforcement, we're talking about a behavior that occurs, and now we're going to talk about something that occurs after the behavior has occurred, so that you can increase the future probability of that behavior or the future duration or intensity of all of those things.
In many definitions, we'll talk about the contingency, the importance of contingency, but the definition we just looked at from Heron, Cooper, Heward stresses contiguity. So it's a stimulus that follows a particular behavior, but following a particular behavior is not enough. There's more layers to that.
That's right. And contiguity is important. It's just not the only thing that's important here. So when I'm working with kids, if I'm working in a classroom, if I'm working in a parent's home with autism and related disorders, typically I tell parents or I'll tell teachers that when a behavior occurs that you like, that you want to increase, you have about 3 to 5 seconds to provide a reinforcer to reinforce that behavior. The reason you don't want to wait longer than that is, let's say a student raises their hand in a classroom and you want to reinforce that. And again, if that student's reinforcers, you've established that those students' reinforcers are stickers, then you want to give that student a sticker because they raised their hand. But you don't want to wait too long because other behaviors can get in the way. So let's say he raises his hand to answer a question and he knows the answer, and somewhere in between raising his hand to answer the question and getting a sticker from the teacher, he starts picking his nose. Now the teacher provides the reinforcer, and you're not reinforcing hand raising, you're reinforcing nose picking. And most teachers, I think, would agree that's not something we want to reinforce in the classroom.
And that goes, for everybody. Not, we're talking about particular examples with students, but that happens to anyone. I'll give you an example that happened to me. A couple of weeks ago, I'm sitting at a meeting, and one of my coworkers comes to me and says, "Thank you so much. That was so helpful." And I sat there.
Do you have any idea what they were thanking you for?
What the heck? It's the first meeting of the day. I haven't seen that woman in a while. I have no clue what she's talking about.
Well, you're just that fantastic that you've helped this person at some point.
Well, yeah, but but if this, whatever she's thanking me for, is something she wants me to do more of,
you have no idea what you want.
At this point, it's like sitting nicely at this meeting. I'm sitting here with my legs crossed, and that's what you're thanking me for. So that's one of the reasons that when we use praise as a reinforcer, we often say use behavior specific praise.
Yeah, thank you for coming to the meeting on time. Thank you for bringing coffee. I didn't have a chance to do that. Thank you for preparing the slides. Thank you for, again, there's a million and one things that she might have been trying to reinforce, but also with the social reinforcer, you never want to tell someone, I have no idea what you're reinforcing.
Well, I did tell her.
Did you?
What exactly are you thanking me for? I have no clue. And she's like, what you did yesterday? I'm like, I brought lunch.
Was it a good lunch?
It was.
Okay, so there you go.
But in the end, she did tell me what it is that she was thanking me for. But I told her, if you want me to do more of whatever it is that I did, you need to let me know what it was that I did. And that's the whole thing with reinforcers and reinforcement, that if we don't make the connection between the stimulus change and the behavior, then, nothing is going to change for that learner.
And I think Catania talks about marking the behavior. The function of a reinforcer is not only does it increase the future probability of a behavior, but it lets the behavior, the person that we're trying to change, it lets them know this is the behavior that resulted in you getting access to that reinforcer. I really like that you came to class and that you're sitting down and that you're raising your hand. That's a behavior that I want to increase. Thank you for coming to class and doing those things. You're telling the learner this is what we're trying to increase. Now, when it comes to some of the applications of reinforcement, I see kids in their homes and in their public schools, and I work with teachers and with parents on learning how to change the behavior of their students. Lily works in a very different setting.
Well, I mostly change the behavior of staff. I work in organizations, and I try to change the behavior of psychiatric patients. And in order to change the behavior of psychiatric patients, we need to change the behavior of the staff.
And I think that's a common thing in both of our settings, is that people will come to us and say, well, that kid needs to change, or that client needs to change, or that staff member needs to change, but without realizing that the individual, the person that we're trying to help, that person's behavior is not going to change unless we have control over the reinforcers that maintain that behavior. Yeah. Could be good behavior, could be bad behavior, or anything in between.
And in the end, the behavior of that learner, be it a student with autism spectrum disorder, or a staff member, or a person with a severe mental illness, that behavior does not happen in a vacuum. It happens along the behavior of other people. So you can't change the behavior of that one individual without changing the behavior of others. In the end, they're all interconnected in a behavioral web.
Sure. And we are the reinforcers of each other to some extent. If someone shows up on time for your meeting and they're usually late, you thank them for showing up on time, you might increase the future probability of them coming on time to meetings if your praise is indeed a reinforcer for that person. Or they might not like that, the fact that you brought up the fact that they're mostly late. So the idea is that we do interact with each other, and that my behavior is a stimulus to you, and your behavior is a stimulus to me. If we are reinforcers to each other, generally we have a better time at work than if we're not. One of the applications of reinforcement that I typically get questions about is students' behavior in a classroom. They want the student to be in the classroom and do good, typical student behavior, which might be raising their hands, asking a question, answering a question. And one of the first things I'll ask a teacher is, well, why should he? And it's hard. A lot of people don't think about that very much. Well, why should he raise his hand? Well, why, if he raises his hand, you're going to ask him a follow-up question, or you're going to ask him to say something, and that might be more work for a student than just sitting there quietly waiting for, for someone else to get called on. So why should that student raise their hand? And if someone doesn't have an answer for me, if they say, well, he's just supposed to, that doesn't really work all that much.
Absolutely. In my practice, I mostly deal with aggressive behavior. So the idea is not so much to increase behavior, but to decrease behavior. But you can't just decrease behavior without putting another behavior in place. And the way to decrease aggressive behavior is to create some other functional equivalent behavior that is not aggressive, and that in order to create that, you need to use reinforcement.
So if screaming at nurses and screaming at other staff members and doctors to be able to get a glass of water usually results in someone giving me a glass of water, I'm going to do that. It works.
Absolutely. And they'll tell you, do I have to scream to get a glass of water?
And again, if that's the most efficient way of getting access to that reinforcer, then there's no reason why someone wouldn't engage in that behavior. So you not only have to look at the client, but you have to look at the environment that client exists in. Now, some of the misapplications of reinforcement occur when someone thinks they understand how reinforcement works and they wind up getting things wrong. So this is when I hear stuff like, everyone likes M&M, so those are the reinforcers that we're going to use. Or I told him he did a good job. That's supposed to be a reinforcer. I give him a point. I give him a sticker. I love the stickers. Stickers are not necessarily reinforcers, except for students that really like stickers.
I gave him an M&M.
What I typically see is that in the beginning of the year, teachers place their order from the teachers' catalogs, and they'll order a treasure chest box, or they'll order a set of stickers, or they'll order whatever they're going to use as reinforcers. And the assumption is because I bought it and because we have it, those are the reinforcers that are available for the student. And in the same breath, usually around October, November, behavior starts picking up again. If a student's not being reinforced, all that often, then problem behavior starts to develop. And I'll hear stuff like, well, I'm offering him the treasure chest when he completes a certain amount of work, or it was even just nice to everyone in the room, and it's not working. When you look through that treasure box, what you see is there's not always a lot of stuff that kids want. There's those temporary tattoos that might not be interesting to a particular student. There's little pieces of plastic junk, and my favorite is the little spider ring that might be a Halloween decoration or something that someone might be interested in. But 9 times out of 10, it's not what that particular student is interested in.
In the end, is what the teacher can afford, and just because the teacher chooses it because it's something that he or she can afford, and they offer it because it's something that they think it's interesting. But the reality is, just because I like it does not mean that you are going to like it. Just because I would, quote unquote, work for it does not mean that you would work for it.
And that's where money becomes a really important reinforcer. Money in itself, it's dirty green paper. It's not something that anyone can really do anything with, but it allows us access to other primary and secondary reinforcers, which we haven't gotten into yet, but we'll just say other reinforcers.
Stick to the topic.
She can buy stickers. I can buy, video games. We can both buy alcohol, although my alcohol might be gin and hers might be Chardonnay, but we got to pick our different reinforcers. Could you imagine working at a place where instead of getting a paycheck, you got a turkey, or you got, a lump of cheese, or you got, 3 bottles of wine for this week?
Yeah, wines is good, but really, when I need to pay my car, wine is not going to help me.
That's right. And even if you were going to buy wine anyway, you want to buy the wine that you want. You want to select what you're interested in. You don't want someone else making those selections for you. So sometimes choice can be a reinforcer, and giving someone more choices to determine or select what reinforcers that they're going to work for, that can increase behavior as well. So what do you have to say? Have we answered your questions about reinforcement? Do you think you understand it a little bit better than before you started?
Give us some reinforcement and comment on it, share it.
Yeah.
Send it to other friends.
Yeah, let us know.
Talk about it.
Certainly comment. Let us know if you want to know more about reinforcement, or if you have a specific question. We'll answer that question.
Yeah. And if you go on the sidebar on the website, there's a little link for you to subscribe to this post. So every time there'll be a new post, you get a notification, and you are able to just come and check it out.
And if you reinforce us by interacting with the material that we're providing, then we'll definitely provide more it'll increase the future probability of us providing more videos in the future. Also, if there's a topic that you'd like to know more about, if there's a term that you're getting stuck on, or any question regarding behavior analysis that you're getting stuck on, please let us know, and we'll do our best to answer that question for you.
You can reach us on our email, Lily, Lili, at thebehavioralweb.com.
And Mike at thebehaviorweb.com. Both of our email addresses are on the first slide, so if you want to contact us, you can. Thank you very much.
See you then.